It was a dreary Tuesday, the kind where the sky feels oppressive and tension lingers like damp air. I'd just dragged myself home from another grueling shift at my temp job, the type that barely covered gas money, let alone my student loans or basic necessities. At 26, I was still living with my parents, not out of laziness or lack of ambition, but because life had dealt me a rough hand. I graduated into an economic slump, then lost 2 jobs in a row to layoffs. I'd tried everything: side gigs, online work, even weekend labor jobs. I paid rent, bought my own groceries, and chipped in for bills when I could. But to my mom, none of that seemed to count. That evening, I walked into a war zone. My mom was waiting in the living room, arms folded, her face set in that familiar grimace that signaled an incoming storm. Before I could even drop my keys, she unleashed a tirade, accusing me of mooching, of being a grown man with no shame, of dragging the family down. I tried to explain. I was job hunting, going to interviews, doing my best. But she wasn't listening. She yelled that I was nothing but a parasite, sapping their resources. Then, in a flash of rage, she grabbed my emergency backpack from the hall closet and flung it out the front door like it was garbage. My dad sat silently at the kitchen table, clutching a newspaper, his hands trembling. I caught his eye for a fleeting moment, and in that instant, I knew there was no reason to stay. The house held no warmth, no refuge. So, I picked up my bag, looked at them both, and walked away. I didn't slam the door or shout. I just left. That quiet exit rattled them more than any fight could have. The weeks that followed were surreal. There was a strange calm in being away from that house, even if I was crashing on a friend's couch with no clear plan. I'd wake early, apply for jobs, take long walks to clear my mind, and finally let myself breathe. For the first time in ages, I wasn't tiptoeing around hostility. My friend Jake didn't ask too many questions, just gave me a blanket, a spare key, and space to exist. We'd chat about music or old times, but my parents were off limits, like a topic too toxic to touch. Beneath the calm, though, anger simmered. How had I become the scapegoat in a home where I'd done nothing but try? It wasn't just my mom's words that stung. It was the years behind them. Years of being the dependable one, fixing their tech, managing their bills, setting up their accounts, printing their documents, teaching them how to navigate the internet, all without expecting gratitude. I didn't cause trouble. I didn't demand attention. I just kept my head down and did what felt right. Yet somehow, I was the problem. When my younger brother wrecked his car while drunk, they bailed him out, saying, "Boys will be boys." When my older sister flunked out of college and bounced between cities, they cheered her, finding herself. But me? I was labeled a burden for needing time to rebuild after a system that promised success left me battered. So in the quiet of those weeks, I untangled myself from their lives. I'd been added to their shared bank account years ago to help my dad manage finances, a practical decision that gave me full access. It had worked fine until now, but it was the last tie binding me to them, and I couldn't leave it intact. I removed myself from the account with proper authorization, flagged some suspicious recurring payments they'd ignored, and asked the bank to pause any changes until my dad, the primary holder, verified them. It was standard security protocol, but to them it would feel like a financial earthquake. 3 weeks later, my phone buzzed. It was my dad, his voice frantic, almost unrecognizable. Why was their account locked? Why couldn't he pay bills? What had I done? In the background, my mom's voice roared, blaming him, blaming me, blaming everyone but herself. I let him vent for nearly 2 minutes before saying, "Ask the parasite," and hanging up. The silence that followed felt like freedom. 2 days later, their lawyer emailed me, accusing me of causing chaos and abusing my access to their account. They tried to paint me as a scheming tech whiz who'd sabotaged his helpless parents. I couldn't help but laugh. Then I spent an hour gathering evidence, screenshots, emails, bank logs, proving I hadn't touched a penny that wasn't mine. My lawyer reviewed it and assured me I was in the clear. Legally, I was untouchable, but the sting of their betrayal lingered. The fact that they'd rather drag me through legal threats than admit their own faults. That night, on Jake's small balcony, I stared at the city skyline, reflecting on the years I'd spent chasing their approval. The birthdays I spent troubleshooting their router, the arguments I endured, soaking up blame for things I didn't do. I was out now, but freedom still felt out of reach. Because I knew my mom, she wouldn't let this end quietly. She needed someone to vilify, and she'd chosen me. But I'd chosen myself too, and I was ready for whatever came next. The fallout hit fast. One day, I was the so-called parasite. The next, I was the family villain. Gossip spread like wildfire. My cousin Lisa texted, asking if I'd really drained my parents' account and vanished. That's when I realized they weren't just mad. They were rewriting history. In their story, I was a spiteful monster, not the son who'd worked tirelessly to keep their lives running smoothly. It was bizarre. I watched their narrative twist and spread. One uncle unfriended me online. Another left a vague voicemail about family loyalty. I didn't bother replying. I didn't need to, because while they were spinning lies, I was building something real. I'd landed a job, a solid IT role at a mid-sized company. Nothing flashy, but stable, with a future. I accepted the offer with a quiet grin, left Jake's couch and moved into a modest apartment with just enough room for a desk, a bed, and a chair. It was sparse, but it was mine. No one could kick me out. No one could call me a failure in my own space. Standing in that empty apartment on my first night, surrounded by quiet, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years, the kind you earn when the world turns against you and you keep moving forward. Meanwhile, my parents were unraveling. Word got around that my dad's business account, linked to their personal one, had caused chaos when it froze. He missed vendor payments, his credit took a hit, and his car lease was denied. They were floundering, too stubborn to admit their own oversight had played a role. They never apologized, never asked if I was okay. But then something shifted. My sister called, the same sister who once mocked me for losing my job. Her voice was soft, hesitant. She said Dad was in the hospital, stress-related heart issues. He'd collapsed during a work meeting and was rushed to the ER. The doctors said he'd been lucky. The anger I'd carried flickered. My dad might have stayed silent when Mom threw me out, but he wasn't cruel, just spineless. I asked which hospital and considered visiting. But I knew my presence would spark another fight. Instead, I did something unexpected. I sent flowers, white lilies like the ones he sent me when I graduated. No note, just the gesture. That small act broke something open. 2 days later, Dad texted, "I'm sorry. You didn't deserve this. Can we talk?" I stared at the message, torn between ignoring it and protecting my newfound peace. But I remembered the man who slipped me cash when Mom cut me off, who stayed up late helping with math homework despite barely understanding it himself. So I agreed to meet, just him, at a quiet diner. He looked worn, older than I remembered. The silence between us wasn't hostile, just heavy with unspoken regrets. He apologized again, admitting he should have defended me. He'd let fear of conflict make him complicit. I told him I valued his words but wasn't sure I could return to that dynamic. He nodded, accepting it without protest. Then he said something that shifted everything. He said the house had changed since I left. Mom had grown colder, angrier, lashing out at everyone. Only after I was gone did he realize how much I'd held things together. Quietly, invisibly. He said I wasn't the burden. I was the foundation. A week later, Mom messaged me. Not with remorse, but with a rambling note about family being messy and words spoken in haste. No accountability, no apology, just deflections. I didn't respond. Forgiveness doesn't mean erasing the past. Some scars heal only with space. That was 6 months ago. Since then, I've rebuilt my life. I got a promotion. I bought a used car. I furnished my apartment slowly, piece by piece. I started therapy and joined a local group making real friends. Every night, I sleep in a home I earned, a place no one can take from me. Dad and I text occasionally. He's trying, and I respect that. We're not what we were, but maybe we'll build something new. Mom? I've accepted she may never see me for who I am, and I'm okay with that. I don't need her validation anymore. I'm not a parasite. I never was. And now, I'm finally free. Thank you for watching Story. Please subscribe and hit the notification bell for more real-life stories.